And let's just get started. I'll just give people a minute or two to show up, and then we'll get right into this. Once again, I'm very sorry, everybody. That was partially my bad, and that was partially YouTube and OBS's bad. So I'll give it a minute or two, and then we will get right into this. As I said, let's do this. So let me just see, is this streaming properly? One of the things they did was they just made it a lot harder to... okay, there we go. All right, concurrent viewers. There we go. And let me just fix the chat. Yeah, so the election's like really kind of stuck at this point. It's kind of in a no man's land, I guess you could say. Things are going pretty good for the Conservatives. We're going to look at this in a minute, and I'll kind of give you a bit of background as to what happened with the fallout over the last debate. And I haven't watched this one yet, so we'll go through this together. I'm going to warn you now, this is probably going to get fairly annoying. Now, in Canada, debates are bilingual. I mean, they used to be completely bilingual, but now they've just separated it. So we have English debates and French debates. So those are kind of the, like I said, the kind of the two different things we have. And that's because Canada is officially a bilingual country. So it's a bit different because, like, in the United States now we have the... what's it called again? You have the Democratic candidate debates where everybody's doing them in both French and English. Sorry, in both Spanish and English. And they kind of switch between the two of them. And we used to do that in Canada where people would switch between English and French. But now we just have French debates and just have English debates. And I think it's just kind of easier for both sides. If you think about it. So... that stuff happened. What else is there? Let's see here. Was anybody able to find this one okay? Just making sure people have shown up before I actually start. Once again, I'm deeply sorry about this whole thing, guys. Let me see if I can find the actual link to this, because it doesn't display to me when I have it up, so... Anyway, so what happened in the aftermath of the last debate? What happened in the aftermath of the last debate was the NDP was regarded as having done really well for reasons that no one can really determine. So they've actually been gaining in the polls. So as they're gaining in the polls, that's primarily been helping the Conservatives. So kind of how the electoral system tends to work in Canada is we only have one theoretically right-of-center party. We have two now that we have the People's Party, but they aren't particularly relevant. And we have 3 or 4 left-of-center parties that are competitive. So left-wing parties in Canada get probably a total of something like, I'm trying to think of what percentage of the popular vote they would get. They probably get like 60-70% of the vote, but because the vote is split between them and we have first past the post, that's the only way the Conservatives can ever win an election. So this was pre-debate. And this is post-debate. So as you can see, things really move. So this is 338. This is kind of like, I guess, the Canadian version of Real Clear Politics or something, where they just have what's kind of going on at the moment. What's happening. So, yeah, it's been kind of a... so... Currently, they're predicting that the Liberals have a 60% chance of winning the most seats, and that the Conservatives have about a 40% chance, and there's only a 26% chance the Liberals will win a majority. Now, the way Canadian politics works, there's not going to be a coalition. Because for whatever reason, coalitions just don't happen in Canadian politics. Like even back, and I think it was the 70s when the Conservatives got a minority government, the Social Credit Party offered to form a coalition government with them, but they refused. For whatever reason, in Canadian politics, it's regarded as a failure if you don't get a majority government, and there's no real interest in having a coalition to make things work. It just normally leads to another election and then another election until somebody wins a majority. So for those of you from other countries, particularly the United States, because the United States I don't think has ever, or maybe it's had a minority government, I'm not sure. A minority government is where no party wins a majority of seats. And under that situation, the party with the most seats is generally invited to form government. So the prime minister and and cabinet ministers will come from that party. Whereas, but they won't have the votes to pass their legislative agenda. So what'll happen is they just won't bring things to vote. They'll just do things because as the party in power, they do control the executive branch. The prime minister will still control it, and the cabinet ministers will still have power over the ministries. So they can try to implement their political program that way. The other way that they attempt to do it is they try to pass weak legislation, or they try to get together some sorry, I'm just blanking here for a minute. They try to get people to support individual bills or have kind of a supply and confidence agreement where they don't overthrow the government. Another thing they'll often do is something called a free vote. In comparison to the United States and a lot of other countries, party discipline is extremely strict in Canada. In practice, party members never vote against a motion their party puts forward. So, like, if the Conservatives were in power, members of the party would never vote against it. Like in the United States, you often will have senators or representatives or just any kind of other person voting against it. That's how Obamacare never got repealed and stuff like that because of McCain. That doesn't happen in Canada. If you vote against something, you normally get kicked out of your party and they put you as the priority to defeat in the next election. Canada has very, very strict party discipline. So what they wind up doing is on a free vote, the vote isn't whipped. So theoretically, people can vote anywhere. People aren't able to technically force people to do it. But if they lose the vote because it's a free vote, they don't lose government. So how it works in a parliamentary system is some motions are what's called confidence issues. So that's like a budget. I guess if there's a constitutional referendum, kind of major issues. And under those, if the government loses the vote, Parliament dissolves and it goes back to an election. We do have fixed election dates in Canada, but they aren't very. There's a lot of ways to get around them. And minority governments pretty much never last the full 4 years. Anyway, so currently the Conservatives and Liberals are tied. The other day the Conservatives were actually up a couple. But what's really happened is, if you can see here, since the last debate, the NDP has gone up quite a bit. The Green Party stayed about the same. The Bloc Québécois has gained quite a bit of support in Quebec. So what this means is there's going to be a lot more vote splitting. The issue the Conservatives faced heading into this election initially was the NDP and Greens were very, very weak, so there was not going to be much vote splitting. And they, generally speaking, win seats through vote splitting because, as I said, if we look at it, the Greens, NDP, and Liberals are all left-wing parties. And if you were to add all of this together, that would be... Sorry, my brain's talking. 32 plus 9... That would be 56% for left-wing parties. The Bloc Québécois is a left-wing nationalist party. So most of the support they'd probably just win every seat if that's not the if that hadn't happened. The BQ is kind of interesting. The Bloc Québécois was actually primarily conservatives. The conservative wing of the Quebec wing of the Conservative Party broke off post Mulroney when a lot of his the Meech Lake Accord and a bunch of his attempts at I don't know if the term would be decentralizing or further giving more rights to the provinces failed. So the conservative wing combined with parts from the other various parties broke off and formed the Bloc, and they only run candidates in Quebec, but they've taken a bunch. The Liberals and Conservatives are pretty close to being tied at the moment. So yeah, things are pretty close. Let's see here. So the big issue that the Conservatives are running into, and really the only reason. Why is this excluding conservative? What the hell? Let me just try turning off my pop-up blocker. Maybe that's why it's not displaying. No, they screwed it up. Conservative is not displaying here. Wow. That is... they should fix that. They should fix that really quick. So the issue at the moment is the Tories are not going to win enough seats in Ontario. That's the big issue. As you can see, the Bloc had picked up a lot of seats in Quebec. The NDP had picked up a couple seats overall. The Greens are going to take a couple. But it's just Ontario's, it appears, is going to vote Liberal. And that's largely because of Doug Ford completely botching up his time as premier, which has really, really hurt the federal Conservative Party's fortunes. So, yeah, so that's kind of been what's been going on for the last little while. I already voted. I went out and just voted Conservative. I don't particularly like the Conservatives, but I just like to get rid of Justin Trudeau. I don't really care. They could be running a potted plant, and I'd vote for him. So that being said, let's go and watch the debate. So this is going to be dubbed because this is the French language debate. So we'll see how obnoxious this is. Okay, so let's just start this. Who's this bitch? Wow. Oh, she's cute. Okay, let me just jump ahead a bit. Oh, those are just clips from the last debate. Okay, let's see here. Let me know if the audio balance is okay. I want you to be able to hear them, but I want you to be able to hear me over them. I should be significantly louder. Oh, there we go. Okay, thanks. I had muted that. I'm sorry. I'll try to resist doing the French-Canadian accent, but I will give you no promises. The frog legs and the... Montreal, Quebec. We shall leave the Canadian Federation unless you give us more welfare checks.
Canadian Debate Production Partnership presents the Leaders Debate 2019.
Oh, this is going to be awful.
Here's Patrice Roy. Good evening. Welcome to the Federal Leaders Debate. Ladies and gentlemen, leaders, welcome. Good evening.
Good evening.
There was a draw to determine your podium positions and speaking order. 5 themes will be covered this evening. Each theme will be launched by a question from a Canadian live After responses from leaders, there will be 2 three-way debates, then rapid-fire questions from a guest journalist. This debate will be followed by Canadians here at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, and we'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here with us tonight. And there'll be gatherings across the country.
Okay, I just like to say this is an ongoing complaint I have with every single debate I cover. There shouldn't be an audience. I hate the fucking audiences. The audiences always heckle, they always shout people down, they always laugh, they always yell out. It's just always a disaster. There shouldn't be an audience there. It's not fair. They should just be debating in a TV studio.
This is the last debate of this campaign, as you know, and I'm counting on you, leaders, to give us clear answers. And most of all, to not all speak at the same time, and I will see to this. And sometimes you will see on the screen the cumulative speaking times. Enjoy the debate, ladies and gentlemen. Environment and energy. And we're going to start this theme in Trois-Rivières this evening.
This is like one of the few issues. Well, I mean, I have many issues with the Conservative Party, but this is one of the issues I have more of an issue with them than I guess kind of the left. Although it's kind of funny because like in the GTA, a lot of the public transit has conservative ads on it saying they're going to bring back the public transit tax credit. So like what had happened was you used to get a tax credit for using public transit on like a daily basis, particularly like regional transit. And the Liberals had repealed it on the grounds that only rich people use public transit. I don't know what poor people use if they don't use public transit, but apparently only rich people use it. And the Conservatives are like, we'll bring it back. And I'm like, that's like an actual solution to reduce carbon emissions, is encouraging people to take electrically propelled stuff where the electricity is produced from renewable sources. I don't know.
The question from Elizabeth Darvaux. Ms. Darvaux, good evening.
Evening.
Darvaux, the leaders are listening to you. Tell us your question.
In an era where we are increasingly concerned...
She'd probably be pretty attractive if she lost like 20 pounds. That's the issue with just a lot of women.
...with the environment, and where the UN has declared a climate emergency, it has become essential that we do what it takes to counter...
Okay, I haven't actually watched any of whatever her name is, videos from Norway, or I don't know. These people are such massive... It begins with the letter F. But, like, some random fucking girl just gives a speech, and everybody's like, oh boy, it's a climate emergency. I didn't think it was before, but this random girl said it, so it must be true. Like, what is with the left and just talking about the fucking, like the wisdom of children? You know who are, like, the most mean, bigoted, cruel, arbitrary people in the world? Children. Have these people ever been to a pub? Well, no, they probably haven't because most of them are wealthy. Have these people ever seen the way kids treat each other in schools? Kids are fucking, like, atrocious to one another. They're cruel. They pick on people over, like, really minor things. Kids are, like, nasty. And it just irritates me how they're like, oh, the wisdom of the children.
This crisis, my question is as follows. Knowing that if we do not act now, we will reach the point of no return. So, what is the first concrete thing you will do to fight climate change?
Okay, but this has been happening, and once again, this is the reason I have so many deaths about global warming. Or no, it's climate change. I just refuse to change the name of it. We've been at the point of no return since An Inconvenient Truth. Since, like, the 1970s. Like, I remember when I was going through grade school, and it was, like, 2003 or 2002, we were watching documentaries about how, like, from the 90s and 80s, that we were past the point of no return, that the world was going to blow up in 5 years, there was going to be World War III, and it didn't happen. Then we had the Inconvenient Truth. And when Inconvenient Truth happened, we're like, oh, we're past the point of no return. I think we had one under Obama, and this is like the latest, we're past the point of no return. Now, is there massive environmental degradation going on? Yeah, there probably is. There probably needs to be a lot more done. As I've said, I'm very much in favor of phasing out fossil fuels, regardless of what you think about their impact on the temperature of the Earth. They just have all kinds of other stuff. Like they create pollution. They've given a whole generation of kids allergies and asthma. They kill all kinds of different species. Like pollution that comes from oil and gas is disgusting. So I mean, there's lots of reasons. It also makes, in a lot of cases, countries dependent upon scum like Saudi Arabia, and basically a generation of Islamism has been like started by. Let me see if I can find that article. Sorry, it just. Okay, let me see if I can show this. So, like, this is an example of what I'm talking about. Let me see if you can see this on. Can you? Yeah, okay, so this is a thing from The Independent. So this was back in March 2000. Literally, they said there would never be another snowfall. Like, and they took this down off their website when someone was like, "Are you gonna like apologize and admit you were wrong?" It's like, how are you supposed to take these clowns like seriously when they're putting shit like this out? And then if anyone calls them on it, they're like, "Oh no, we never said that." I don't know. Once again, is it a cover up? I don't know. My point is, it looks like a cover up though. When like people ask legitimate questions, like, you said there was a 99% chance the world was going to blow up and it didn't blow up, and you like gaslight the person and tell them they're a psycho, that doesn't really endanger confidence to your position.
For your question. Well, it's a question that we're hearing from across the country. We've heard it as we've crossed the country, and people are telling us that the future of their children, the future of the environment, the fight against climate change is essential. And we have done a lot in the last 4 years, but we have to continue to move forward. And we need to stand up to conservatives like Jason Kenney and Doug Ford and the oil barons who are supporting them to continue to fight against climate change and build a better world. That is why the choice that you're making tonight is so important.
Okay, but your side is also against. Your side is against building the oil pipeline. Or no, actually, sorry, Justin is ambiguous over that. The oil pipeline, which will reduce carbon emissions. Your side is against building public transit. Particularly against subways. The left in Canada doesn't like subways. They're against subways and public transit, and they think that bikes are the solution. They're like, well, I remember Environment Canada, it was like in November or something, and they put up on their Facebook, "Why not bike to work?" And I'm like, what the fuck? The way Canadian cities are laid out means that that's kind of difficult just because of how big they are. And B, really? People are supposed to bike in like -20 weather? And biking's kind of bullshit too, because you get to work and you're all sweaty and yeah.
And I trust Canadians. I trust that we will move forward together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Bernier.
Bernier.
Good evening. The other parties will tell you that they will meet the targets under the Paris Accord, but they will not be able to reach them because they'd have to impose a tax on carbon to the tune of 300 tons. And they can't do that. They said they're going to save the world, save our climate. But as you know, Canada's global carbon emissions only amount to 2% of the total world emissions.
Uh-oh.
So in the People's Party of Canada, we want to take concrete steps so that our water and our air are free of pollution.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Don't call out China. Don't say that this is China's fault.
We need to take honest steps to protect our environment and not be hypocritical like the other leaders here are on the stage regarding climate change. They don't have a solution.
No, they really don't.
That's a huge issue. I know that in Quebec there has been severe flooding. There have been forest fires. It's a real fight we're dealing with now.
None of these things have, like, once again, like, what is this nonsense? None of these things happen. Like, am I crazy for thinking that when they make statements like this, they're saying forest fires didn't happen prior to global warming? Like, there was massive climate change during, I think it was the 6th or 7th century. But one of the things that happened was after the plague of Justinian, or around that time period, the global temperature went up. And a lot of places, the desert really spread throughout the Middle East and spread through North Africa. And that was kind of part of the reason why the Arabs were able to explode over onto the scene, was because the climate had kind of pushed more in their direction. So, I mean, stuff like, yeah, grapes grew in England. You had the medieval warm period. You had the Little Ice Age. I mean, the climate change, like, it's just so disingenuous when it's like, oh, there were never hurricanes before carbon emissions.
What we're proposing now is not to purchase a pipeline like Mr. Trudeau did. We want to end subsidies to the oil patch. That's a step we're willing to take immediately, and we want to reinvest that money in renewable energy, clean energy, and we want to invest.
Okay, so let's just think about this for a minute. If they end the subsidies or whatever to oil and gas, will that reduce the amount of oil and gas that's produced? No, it'll just make it more expensive.
Massively in public transit. There are things we can do. It's just a question of having the courage, and we have that courage.
Mr. Scheer.
Yes, the environment is one of the pillars of this campaign, and as a father of 5 children, I want to make sure that the next generation will have a cleaner environment than that which we inherited ourselves. Contrary to what Mr. Trudeau claims on this file, his plan is a failure. One of the first decisions he made as Prime Minister was to authorize 8 billion litres of wastewater to be spilled into our rivers. We will end this because we are now in 2019.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Yes! It's the current year! Yes! It's the current year! Oh, I'm sure we're going to get that a lot. It's 2019.
Good evening. Thank you for welcoming us tonight. There are definitely many measures that can be undertaken. Let me mention a few of these. I think that Parliament should, through a law, as Mr. Singh said, we should stop subsidizing big oil. We're talking about $10 billion a year based on an Équiterre study that might be ringing a bell, Mr. Trudeau.
Okay, but, like, I don't even know anything about the subsidies, but let's just think about this for a minute. Does the oil companies, does oil and gas generate more than $10 billion for the Canadian economy? Yes, I can say that without even thinking it. Like, and what are these subsidies? They never explain, like, what the subsidies are. Like, because the subsidies are often in Canada things like subsidizing the cost of selling gasoline to, like, isolated northern communities. Like, I need I need some more context here.
It's targets, because right now, the 2009 targets of Mr. Scheer became the 2015 targets of Mr. Trudeau, and they have not been attained. We can also have incentives to electrify transportation, mass transit.
You have Ms. May.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You are absolutely right. What you said is true. We are too close to a point of no return. We have to avoid the worst scenario. The Green Party is the only party.
So yeah, Elizabeth May, I don't know if she was ever actually ordained an Anglican priestess, but she credits Anglicanism and Jesus as being her main sources.
That has a platform that is in line with the advice of the IPCC scientists. We know that it is essential to create a war cabinet like the one that existed during World War II.
What?
We must work together because we have to get off fossil fuels, stop our dependence, and we have to change our economy into a green economy.
Ms. Darbo and Trois-Rivières.
Okay, I have a question for the chat. What source of renewable energy do environmentalists support? Is there any form of energy that environmentalists actually support? I can't think of one. I've seen them argue that building solar panels in the desert would cause widespread environmental destruction. They hate windmills because windmills supposedly kill birds. They hate, like, everything. They hate hydropower. Hydropower's the worst. Tidal power's the worst. There's no form of no, they hate hydroelectric power. There's literally no form of electricity that they like.
I hope this was informative, and those are the responses they give you. Thank you very much for participating tonight. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. So the first three-way debate, there will be Ms. May, Mr. Trudeau, and Mr. Blanchet. Since the Kyoto Protocol 30 years ago, politicians have been promising to cut greenhouse gases, but to reach the Paris targets, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has estimated that the carbon tax, which is currently $20 per ton, must climb to $102 over the next few years. And to be concrete for people at the home, that's 23 cents extra per liter of gas.
I remember there's a book I read called The Ethical Case for Fossil Fuels, and the last chapter was about fusion power. And in it, they had a whole bunch of quotes from environmentalists who are against fusion power. And they were against it on the grounds that it would allow human civilization to continue indefinitely without destroying the environment. And they're like, the issue with it is it's a way of solving the crisis that doesn't punish humans enough. So, I don't know.
Mr. Blanchet, you agree with the $102. Ms. May, you're proposing $200. Mr. Trudeau, are you waiting for after the elections to disclose your price?
Oh, Mr. Roy, we have a plan to increase that price to $50 a ton in 2022. But these numbers, $100, $200 a ton, that's if nothing else is done other than a price on pollution. We have chosen to put in place a wide range of measures to protect nature, to invest in ending coal energy production, to end the use of single-use plastics.
I'm okay with getting rid of coal. I think we need to get rid of coal.
To do all this, but we are going to do these things because we're already doing more than any other government has done in the history of this country to protect the environment and to fight climate change.
Yes, thank you. But the problem is that it's not enough to just talk about a price on carbon. We also have to have targets that are aligned with scientific advice. And right now it's not 30% of 2005 levels by 2030. That's Mr. Trudeau's target, which is the same as Mr. Harper's target. It's not enough. We have to have a plan to eliminate fossil fuels by 2050, and by 2030 we have to have a target of 60% reductions of greenhouse gases, and it is truly possible.
Okay, here's another reason why these people are full of shit. So we have to, I get the impression from this, they're saying if we don't reduce fossil fuel usage, if we don't stop carbon emissions in this country, it's going to be a disaster. How are we supposed to reduce carbon emissions below previous levels if we're undergoing massive population growth on a constant basis from immigration? So, like, how are we supposed to, like, deal with any of this when the population is exploding and cities are sprawling and we've far outgrown our infrastructure? But they won't consider that, and that's another reason. Like, these people are not serious. They're like, no, immigration has nothing to do with our environmental issues. If we slowed it down, it's not going to. Yeah.
Well, because it is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. It's not just with the carbon tax.
I think we should be more specific. Yes. In the end, it should be that the only oil we use is oil that is not burnt. It must be used for something else. We must put a date on that, a time frame for it, and then we need to see how long will it take to and so on. Let's not talk about measures in 2025 or 2030. What are the targets? 3% less next year, 3% less the year after that? And that also pertains to getting all the oil that's in the soil of Alberta. We propose a green equalization. We have an average in Canada. The provinces that pollute the most, pay into this green equalization, and the best performers get money.
This initiative, Mr. Blanchet, highlights one of the big challenges that you have as leader of the Bloc Québécois, which is to impose a pan-Canadian plan.
So the issue is, like, this sounds like a good idea. Oh, let's punish the provinces that pollute more. But a lot of this is just kind of geography. So Quebec is a massive province that has tons and tons and tons of rivers. So Quebec produces an immense amount of hydroelectricity. If Alberta had anything close to the amount of the amount of hydropower that Quebec did, they would use it. It's not like Alberta has, like, all of this hydropower they refuse to develop. They would use it if they had it, but certain provinces in Canada, like Ontario and Quebec, have a lot of hydropower, and other provinces don't. I'm just going to look up what the electricity mix is by province.
And you need a government that's ready to do it, a government that's ready to stand up to Jason Kenney, to the oil companies, ready to stand up to Doug Ford, and all those conservatives who don't want to do anything for the environment. And there are 4 of us here who will fight to protect the environment, and our government has done a lot over the last 4 years. But we know that we need to keep going, and that's why we can't stop. It's important that Quebecers, Francophones, and Canadians be part of a government that wants to fight climate change.
The reality is that the situation right now is a climate emergency. We have to move quickly, and now all of the other leaders here on scene with me, there is no one who has a workable plan to avoid the worst case scenarios. Greta Thunberg is right. Our house is on fire. How dare you?
Mr. Trudeau.
Yes.
In terms of the pipeline, Mr. Scheer was Quebec during it was clear he could force East Pipeline on Quebec, but you weren't clear. There could be a project tomorrow morning on the table. Mr. Trudeau, would you force a pipeline or not?
That's part of a process that requires that we have approval from community.
So I'm just looking at some statistics. So Ontario has actually gotten progressively better at like per capita usage has declined over the last decade, but because of rapid population growth, the amount of carbon emissions keeps going up. So, yeah.
Communities, approval from Indigenous peoples. We need to work with the scientific community to look at the impact, and we'll move forward the same way we move forward with the Trans Mountain Pipeline to try to get approval and to do it in a rigorous scientific way. People know.
Okay, so in Quebec, electricity is 97% hydro, just because of the way that electricity works there. So Quebec basically just gets all their electricity from nature, which is not something that other provinces have. They just don't have access to it. So
that we can't have more oil by rail. We know that it's very dangerous and that it pollutes a lot. We need to put the profits from what we need right now, because we know that the transition isn't going to happen tomorrow. We need to put the...
Yeah, Alberta's almost entirely coal. That's largely, once again, just because that's the resources they have available for producing electricity.
Profits towards green energy, towards the fight against climate change, and every dollar of profit will go to green initiatives.
Mr. Trudeau, you are proposing to use public funds for a pipeline in a situation of crisis. It's a climate emergency. We have to stop all pipelines. We have to stop...
In Ontario, we use nuclear power. So I think like 60% of Ontario's electricity is nuclear. 25% of it is hydro. About 10%, to the credit of the previous government, is other renewables, and then there's a bit of excess capacity from natural gas. So, why aren't we building more nuclear power? Because nuclear power doesn't pollute the environment. And that's
Shale
why.
gas everywhere in Canada.
But-
If we have just this chance to avoid the worst case scenario, that's what the scientists are telling us. This is not a question of political targets. This is a question of
Do this
what
quickly, Mr.
actually
Two
happening.
things. First, Quebec does not want. Will you tell Quebec no, there will be no pipeline in Quebec? Second thing, if we make proposals in chamber and you find that they're good proposals, you say that we can't implement it, well, will you vote in favor of our ideas?
Answer, Mr. Trudeau, before we move on the other two individuals.
We've created a system with C69 which allows us to get approval for good projects, and bad projects won't move ahead.
A good project could move
Good
ahead,
pipeline, does that exist?
so you would
Well,
oppose it?
listen, it's better than having more oil by rail.
Three-way debate, Mr. Singh, Mr. Bernier, and Mr. Scheer. We're going to move on with continue with the pipelines because there's been a lot of talk about this. The Legault government has repeated that in Quebec there is no social license. Mr. Bernier, Mr. Scheer, you're in favor of a pipeline? And you said you're right under the Canadian Constitution, but do you not fear backlash and
Okay, in British Columbia, 87% of electricity comes from hydro. So, keep that in mind.
Canadian sentiment in Quebec or an anti-Quebec sentiment in Western Canada if you impose a pipeline, Mr. Scheer?
That is the reason for which I put forward the idea of an energy corridor, because I know that Quebecers would prefer
Like,
homemade
let's-
and Canadian energy. A lot of Quebec
Let's be honest, people are going to be using electricity in the foreseeable. People aren't going to just stop using electricity no matter how much you bitch at them. So the question is, are we going to try to figure out a way of dealing with this and producing the electricity and improving efficiency, or are we just going to bitch about it? And you can like hydro or you can dislike hydro, but it's what we have. So, yeah.
energy goes to the United States, and they buy gas and petrol from the United States. This is nonsensical. I want Canada to be able to share its own.
Yeah, big issue in Canada is we produce a lot of oil and gas, but we have very little refining capacity. So what often will happen is we'll sell the oil and gas to the States and then buy it back as a refined product. So it doesn't make any sense.
Natural resources from west to east. It's the best option for all Canadians and Quebecers.
The energy corridor that Mr. Scheer is proposing is going to take years to build. We urgently need a pipeline, and you're right about the Constitution and constitutional peace and the nation's unity, and that is why Albertans are calling for the right to export their oil to other markets in addition to the US market. And I don't think that Mr. Scheer will in fact go to the Constitution to force the construction of pipelines. But Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Scheer have the same stance on climate change. Mr. Scheer will put big price
That's
on
false.
big polluters, and we say that we're going to leave this up to the provinces. Quebec is doing very well. We should leave it up to the provinces to take firm action on the environmental.
I think I can sum the situation up here for viewers. This is Mr. Pipeline, and this is Mr. Pipeline 2, and Mr. Trudeau, I'm not so sure. But I'm Jagmeet Singh. I will never force a pipeline on Quebec. That is clear.
Mr. Scheer?
The current plan put forward by Mr. Trudeau was to give huge.
Like, I don't get what's so dumb and what's so, like, counterintuitive about using Canada's petroleum and investing that in, like, energy efficiency and, like, nuclear plants and renewable energy. Like, I don't really get why that's such a dumb idea, but these people largely can't comprehend that.
Exemptions for large polluters. Large companies have a special agreement with government. Taxpayers and Canadian workers have to pay 100% of their carbon tax. There are no taxes in my plan.
Hold on, hold on. You
Maxime.
would place a massive exemption for the
Maxime.
biggest emitters.
You will not tax anything. You won't win anything. With my plan, Canadians will no longer pay.
See what happens. We'll see what happens, Mr.
We will
Scheer.
invest in technology. We
So, as I said in the past, probably the province that's done the best version of what they're talking about is British Columbia. So, in British Columbia, when they introduced a carbon tax, it was revenue neutral. So, what happens is, based on whatever they collected the previous year and what they expect to collect from the carbon tax next year, they, in real time, will adjust corporate taxes and personal income taxes. So British Columbia, the government makes a lot of money off of the carbon tax, but British Columbia has the lowest personal and business taxes in Canada. So if you're a company and you don't really consume much in the way of carbon, like you're a service sector or something like that, a lot of them moved to British Columbia. And they're like, look, taxes are low here. And what it did was it encouraged efficiency while reducing the tax burden on people who are trying to do the right thing. And that worked pretty well. But once again, we can't do something like that because that would make sense.
will fight against climate change in a global context. That is what is missing in all other platforms.
Go ahead.
Well, listen, Mr. Scheer wants to take Canadian taxpayers' money to combat climate change, but in other countries abroad, and hand over billions of dollars to combat climate change elsewhere. But the fact of the matter is we need to protect Canada's climate back home. And the fact of the matter is that there are so much raw sewage that is dumped in our lakes, in our rivers. This is an increase of 10% vis-a-vis 2013. We need to invest in that and do that for Canadians.
100,000 children, young people, were in the streets demonstrating in Montreal, and they said action is urgently needed. Mr. Trudeau says a lot of nice things, but he doesn't do much.
So by that logic, if a bunch of young people came out and demonstrated against abortion, he would be pro-life. So, like, if young people came out and they said, look, we want to stop the slaughter of the unborn, by his logic, we should do that. Or am I misinterpreting what he's
It
saying?
doesn't work for people. What we need now is to give young people hope. We can say, yes, we can go ahead, we can get rid of subsidies to the oil patch. We can reinvest in clean energy. We can invest massively in public transit. We can act now, and we have to act right now.
Mr. Scheer, I have a question for you to relaunch the debate. You want to abolish the carbon tax. Is it not like granting people a permit to pollute for life? Giving companies a
Absolutely
permit?
not. It doesn't give them free rein. Currently, there's no price on carbon in Quebec, but there's a there's a cap and trade system in Quebec that Quebec itself instituted. Well, you're right, and the environment is a shared area of jurisdiction between the federal government and the provinces, and under the People's Party of Canada's plan, we will leave it up to the federal government to make sure our waterways are clean, and it's incredible. The city of Montreal and the city of Vancouver had to take action against this raw sewage being dumped in their waterways. We want a clean environment, but not through the carbon
What
tax.
is clear is that with the Liberal government's plan, Mr. Trudeau gave huge exemptions to the biggest polluters. So when he put a price on carbon, it wasn't for big polluters, it was simply for everyone, for Canadian workers. And that is the problem with his approach. My approach will focus on technology through taxation, and not taxation rather.
The problem with Mr. Scheer is that your plan was written for industry. That's unacceptable.
Very much, sirs. That ends our three-way debate.
I don't want Canadian industry to like develop. I don't want
Talk about shutting off from the press. Your question to the
Ms. May, I'll begin with you.
trying to like work with industry. Private companies don't produce anything in this country.
You want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in a drastic fashion in Canada. You said so earlier. I'll ask you the question directly. Would you not object to an economic downturn in Canada? And even though some people say this could lead to thousands of lost jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Cardinal. That is a very relevant question. No, I am not in favor of the shrinking of the economy, but I am in favor of a transformation of the Canadian economy. Because, as Mr. Scheer said, we need a corridor and national infrastructure, but not for pipelines, only for decarbonized electricity with growth in our capacity to use renewable energy, wind energy, solar energy as well. We have economic opportunities without
Thank
oil.
you, Ms. May. Next question for Mr. Blanchet. A brief question for you. You said you're very proud of your environmental platform. You talked about green equalization. How do you explain your support to the third link?
Green equalization means giving more money to Quebec. But doesn't Quebec not need it because it's the one that has the most renewable?
Between Quebec City and
First, I
Leeds.
did not support the third link. I said I was not against. I didn't say I was in favor either, for simple reasons. First, the environment minister asked for an assessment. I've been environment minister in Quebec before, and I respect that process. If you ask an institution, and by the way, we would like this institution to have precedence over federal environmental assessment, so if we ask that institution to assess the project, let's wait for the result. And ultimately, the third link is of Quebec's government purview. It's not of federal's purview. There's this interference all the time from the federal. It's very irritating, and I think that we
Thank
can
you,
make
Mr.
good
Blanchet.
decisions
Mr.
once
Scheer.
the assessment is done.
You believe in fighting climate change, but you always say it is on condition that it happens globally. Is this not a convenient way of asking other countries to do their part while Canada continues to blithely pollute?
Not at all. With my plan, we have a balanced approach. We have a whole range of measures to reduce our emissions, for example, through investing in technology, through a tax credit for corporations and businesses that adopt new production methods. But we have to recognize the fact that Canada emits only 1.6% of global emissions. If we chase investments out of Canada, life will be more expensive for all Canadians. China and India's economies will replace our emissions, which will be useless. That's why we want a global approach.
Mr. Singh, last year at the beginning of the year, you were not against the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, but then you changed your mind in the course of the year. What are we to make of your contortions and flip-flops on the transportation of oil and gas?
It's clear to me that the future of our country and our planet is...
I'm going to skip ahead. This is unbearable.
Thank you, Mr. Bernier.
Okay, public finances. Okay, let's get to something different.
Economy and finances. And with us in the room tonight, we have a Canadian, David Saint-Jean, who would like to ask a question to you.
Good evening.
I hate these fucking contrived, like, people they obviously pre-picked.
Thank you very much for being with us. We're listening.
Here's my question. When you're elderly and retired, life is much more expensive.
You get put on an
when you
igloo.
live alone instead of with another person. We all know this. And you cannot, among other things, take advantage of income splitting, and you're alone in covering all of your expenses. So, do you intend to increase pensions for the elderly or increase the age credit? What tax measures will you intend to introduce to help seniors living alone?
Very good question. Thank you very much. Mr. Blanchet, you can answer first.
Good evening, Ms. Saint-Jean. What you said is remarkable.
The fact that you and your generation opted not to save it all for retirement, expecting that the children you didn't have would pay for it, is remarkable. And you shouldn't have to pay for the consequences of your actions. So we're going to raise taxes on the children you did have, and they're going to pay for your retirement. That is our plan, and I think it's a good plan, and I think people who don't think it's a good plan are racists.
The baby boomers, as you know, will retire very shortly.
Fuck the baby boomers.
And they deserve a happy and hopefully prosperous retirement
Nope.
because they built the society in which we live.
They built the society.
Increasing by $110 the old age pension. And there will be various tax credits.
Literally, we live in a society. Yes.
Also, we propose that after that a spouse has died, the living spouse gets the benefits for a few months. These are various measures that are in our platform because we believe it's important.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanchet, Mr. Scheer.
What is clear is that the cost of living is a very important issue in this campaign. This is the pillar of our platform. We'll make life more affordable for all Canadians, for all Quebecers. More specifically, for seniors, those who have retired, we will increase the age credit by $1,000. Many of our tax credits will also be available to you. For example, the transit tax credit. We will also eliminate GST for people who have...
Part of me just really hates all these carve-outs and exemptions. Part of me just kind of wishes they just reduce taxes overall, rather than having like 10 billion... I don't know.
The GIS for our most vulnerable seniors, often women living alone. But we know that there's more to do, and that's why we have promised to improve OAS. We'll increase it by 10% for those over 75. And if somebody loses their partner, we know that that's a very difficult moment, and that's why we are going to increase the survivors benefit for the CPP and the QPP by up to 75%, because we know that supporting our seniors is essential in a rich and generous society like ours.
Thank you, Ms. Saint-Jean. I will add, as I forgot at the beginning, that I recognize that we are here on unceded Algonquin land.
Oh!
And I will say that yes, the Green Party is committed to increasing pension benefits, and I'm 65 years old myself. So I am in the same position, but I'm not ready to retire just yet. But
yeah, so anyways, I guess it's a side note, I finally went back to confession yesterday, so that was good. There's a very nice priest in downtown Toronto I like to go see. But I don't know, a couple times I've been to Mass in Canada, the priests have talked about how we live on Turtle Island and how like we live on unceded land, and it's just ugh.
I will set up a strategy for seniors, and I will also set up a minister within the federal cabinet, and that minister will have the goal of reducing the cost of living of seniors.
Well, we've just seen that all the other leaders on the stage have promised you what you essentially want to hear. And the fact of the matter is that you'll see that there'll be an increase to the seniors' pension. But clearly the country is indebted and we are bereft of means. The only solution is to balance the budget in 2 years, and at that point, and only at that point, will we consider tax breaks. And the other leaders are behaving as if there was no deficit and as if nothing was wrong. It's crucial that we balance the budget immediately. Were there to be a recession in the next couple of years, we have no more wiggle room left. I'm not going to make promises that I can't keep.
How dare Bernier act like an adult? Like, we don't have to pay for these things. The children we don't have are going to have to pay for these. We can just take out more money. I mean, I don't want to solve Canada's economic issues. I want a LARP.
Thank you for the question. You've raised an issue that affects a lot of people, and thank you for taking the time to explain your situation. I think it's ridiculous that seniors have to deal with this kind of challenge.
Because we live in a society.
A lot.
Some of them did.
To retire with dignity.
No, I mean, like, I don't want to be the... No, I do want to be the dick here. A lot of seniors I know were grossly irresponsible when they were younger. Like, they blew... Okay, I'm just going to take a side rant here. Okay, so myself and my mother are probably going to inherit nothing from our grandparents. So my grandparents on my mother's side inherited probably millions of dollars. My great-grandparents saved a lot of money. They left all their money to their children, basically. And so a bunch of wealthy people dying in the family meant that my grandparents got like hundreds of thousands, if not millions and millions of dollars from them. So my grandparents went off and blew it all on jewelry and like cruises that they didn't enjoy and like appliances they didn't use. Like when we were cleaning out their houses, there was tens of thousands of dollars of unopened clothing and that kind of thing. So we found out that they intend to leave basically none of the remaining money to my mother. They're going to donate it all to like some vulture Christian charities. So yeah, so my mother, because my grandparents have a variety of health issues, and she's been a very dutiful daughter for like the last 30 to 40 years, and she's going to probably get virtually no inheritance from them. Actually, it's interesting because my great aunt died, and she left 100% of her money to charity. Despite her brother having done all this shit for her for years, it's a common attitude among the baby boomers that what you want to try to do is, if not die in debt, then to die neutral. So you have to spend every dollar you have, even if it's not giving you any pleasure. Because, I mean, that's the thing. It's not even that they were spending money on stuff they enjoyed. It was like they were just doing it for status signaling and for consumption. Like they did, I think it was like 3 or 4 trips along the Panama Canal so that they could go up it and then down it and then on both sides of the ship. Was like the kind of things they'd spend money on. And they hated the cruises. They despised them.
And that's why we're setting up programs to help you. We will help with pensions, and we will increase and improve services to seniors. We're talking about pharmacare, dental care. This will bring down the cost of living and help you save money. And we would also put limits on...
And I mean, if you want to blow your cash, like whatever, the thing that irritates me the most is just when they complain that millennials feel entitled to an inheritance. That's literally been the norm for all of human history prior to this century.
Fees and charges, and that would help too.
Feel more informed about how you're going to vote? I'm not asking you who you're going to vote for, but...
Well, all of these platforms are interesting, but in 4 years, we'll see.
Now, moving on to our three-way debate between Mr. Singh, Ms. May, and Mr. Blanchet.
Oh, this is going to be a freak show.
Have proposed tax cuts. On the contrary, you are proposing new taxes and new expensive programs. Do you not think that the middle class needs a break? I'll start with you, Mr. Singh.
I think that the middle class needs help. We will never increase taxes on the middle class, on workers.
What? You will,
The
though.
problem is that the wealthiest Canadians aren't paying their fair share. The wealthiest Canadians have a lot of money, and they're not
Okay, that's not true. I don't like the rich as much as they... I think that they're globalist shills, but they do pay a disproportionately large amount of tax revenues. And B, you can't make them pay how much you want to make them. You just can't. They just won't pay it. They'll find a way to evade taxes.
sharing it. So what we're going to do is not just nice talk like Mr. Trudeau. We're going to put a tax on the ultra wealthy. This will give us access to $70 billion in revenues, new revenues, We've seen other governments invest in big companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, but I prefer to invest in people.
Oh, that's cringe.
For you.
I also work for the people in our platform. Is the only one in this election that has actually been costed. We have a costed platform, and we have proven where we're going to get the revenue. And Mr. Singh has said it, there's a tax for riches for the rich, but there's also a tax on web giants like Facebook and Netflix, and we are going to find those funds because
We're gonna drive them out of the country.
more funds to Canadians. We have to eliminate tuition. We have to invest in post-secondary education as well. We are completely committed to a pharmacare program as well. But we know that we can do everything we can to help seniors, and we want to find the priorities that we need to focus on and find the revenue that we need to balance the budget in 5 years.
A small detail. Besides Mr. Scheer and Mr. Singh, I think everybody has costed platforms, Madame May, that respect the rules as far as I'm concerned. I agree with the principle that we need to find new revenue streams, and I agree that they can't come from the same pockets. However, there are tax havens, there's tax evasion that always favor the same players. It is true that we can tax the web giants with a 3% levy. We're talking here hundreds of millions of dollars, but I think that that levy should be used to help the media and the cultural sector. So I think we can work that way, but I think we should also look at the green equalization, which will lower the expenses of the federal government.
Okay, so let's take a look at it. Here's a good graph. I'm pretty sure this is from the United States, but close enough. This is a pretty similar to every country on Earth. Okay, so the top 1% pay more than a third of all income taxes. So they actually pay a disproportionately high amount of tax revenue relative to the amount of money they earn. If we look at it, the bottom 50% pay less than 3% of all income taxes. That's just kind of the reality of this. You can like that, you can dislike that. I mean, but that's just kind of the objective reality of the whole tax the rich thing.
And I think we can save $400 million by having a single tax return for citizens, for companies. That was a unanimous request from the National Assembly. Of course, the Bloc will bring that question to Ottawa. And Mr. Singh said he was in agreement as long as there were no job losses. And I think we can all agree there would be no job losses with a single tax return. There's $400 million for you.
I'd like to add another thing. It's a matter of revenue, but it's also a matter of choices. Over the past year, what Mr. Trudeau did was spend a lot of money, $14 billion, for the biggest companies so they could buy planes and get a seat on the Security Council, and also $5 billion to buy a pipeline, and also in corporate welfare, he said he would cut $6 billion, write off $6 billion in corporate debt. That's $25 billion.
How are we supposed to verify? I don't even know what the fuck he's talking about. Can anyone follow this? I can't.
Growing concern about the debt and the deficit which are increasing. So does that concern you?
Nope, not at all.
Deficit worries me because the Liberal government has given billions away to the wealthiest Canadians. If that money had been used to invest in Canadians, that would be quite a different matter.
Platform, the budget will be balanced in 5 years, unless there's something like a recession. But I would like to add that subsidies for the oil sector have increased over the last 4 years.
Finding the money in the pockets of the wealthy is one thing, sending it to the right people is another thing, and reducing the debt is a third thing. What we can't say is that within a few days we're gonna cut so much. The impact on the economy would be too much. In our platform, we want to cut the deficit by half. I would love to do it faster, but it's important that we get new revenue streams. That revenue, that income does not come from taxpayers, but rather from the web giants, from subsidies we can sell Trans Mountain. We should not invest any more in Trans Mountain. That's how we can find a lot of money.
Now we're going to move on to our second three-way debate on the economy. Mr. Bernier, Mr. Trudeau, and Mr. Scheer. Mr. Trudeau, you have no plan to return to a balanced budget. Mr. Bernier, you want to cut lively. You said it earlier. Mr. Scheer, we still haven't seen your costed platform, your figures. Where are you going to cut things?
First of all, I made a very clear commitment. We will balance the budget in 5 years. All of our announcements were sent to the Parliamentary Budget Officer for his calculations, contrary to Mr. Trudeau, who put forward a platform that was simply written on the corner of the napkin. But
Wow.
Over 50% of
Ridiculous,
have
Mr.
not
Chair.
been
We presented a
numbered or
real
calculated.
plan.
Where are your
Full
numbers,
costed
Trudeau?
full plan, a full costed plan. It was approved in part by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, but the reality is that we are so ambitious with our investments and our middle class tax cuts. Mr. Scheer, unlike you, are promising a tax cut of $50,000 for multi-millionaires. You have a universal tax cut which helps families who make $400,000 a year more than families who make $40,000 a year.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, because they pay more in taxes.
That's a lie. You lied when the
I hate this like class warfare thing. Like, you're a bad person if your family makes it. Like, why are you a bad person? Why do you not deserve a tax credit? Like, I don't get it. Whatever.
Urban Mail published the story. You lied when you said that Jody Wilson recalled.
Mr. Scheer,
And you are lying
we
today.
lowered taxes for the middle class, and we increased them for the richest Canadians, and you voted
Taxes
against
for
that.
80% of
Exactly.
Canadians in the middle class, Mr. Trudeau.
Well, but speak one at a time, please. Mr. Bernier.
If I look around me here, party leaders, they all say they're going to balance the budget, but in 5 years' time, and they're asking for a term in office of 4 years, so no one will end up balancing the budget. And Mr. Scheer is talking about adding billions of dollars to the debt. Mr. Trudeau's going to follow suit. It's irresponsible. Our national credit card is full and overflowing. It's brimming. So the only thing is to stop corporate welfare, put an end to subsidies to corporations, and if we want to kickstart the economy, we have to put money back in the pockets of business people, in halls across Canada. We're going to do this because we're going to find the money to balance the budget.
Is a conservative argument. We've heard it many times. We heard that for 10 years under Mr. Harper, and you were both part of that party.
Yeah, you kind of were.
We saw tax cuts for the richest Canadians. We saw underinvestment in infrastructure, in seniors, in our young people, and they didn't deliver economic growth. Over the last 4 years, we have invested in the middle class. We have seen 1 million new jobs created. We have seen the lowest unemployment rate in the history of this country, and we've lifted 900,000 people out of poverty.
Too many lies in this discourse. I don't even have time to answer to all of them. People with the lowest revenue levels benefited from our plan. Trudeau's excuse was to invest in infrastructure, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer clearly stated that there was no plan. We have the worst of both worlds. We have large deficits.
Okay, that's about all I can take. This is just, I don't know. This wasn't as much of a freak show as the previous day. We at least got to talk more about stuff, but this was about kind of like boring, like economic issues instead of like the insane social stuff. So I hope people enjoyed this. Maybe I'll have another stream or two over the weekend because it is Thanksgiving. So I just wanted to say God bless everybody. Have fun with your families, and I will talk